It was supposed to be the perfect celebration, a milestone anniversary, a night where family gathered to celebrate the love my wife and I had built over a decade. But as the laughter rang and the music played, everything I held dear unraveled before my eyes. My wife, standing just a few feet away, was smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years, wrapped in the embrace of another man, a man I knew. And my parents? They stood frozen, watching the spectacle unfold, their expressions caught between shock and pity. In that heart-stopping moment, I felt my world crack open. Little did she know, my revenge would be as unforgettable as her betrayal. They say trust is the foundation of a marriage. For a decade, I believed that I had that with Emily. We'd met in college, bonding over late-night study sessions and dreams of future success. She was driven, always ambitious, and, most of all, fiercely loyal, or so I'd thought. We'd been married 12 years, had one beautiful son, and built a life that I'd thought was as solid as granite. I worked long hours to provide for our family, ensuring we could live comfortably in our quiet suburban neighborhood. Emily, with her steady career in finance, balanced our lives with the perfect touch. We had friends, family close by, and plans for the future. I thought we had it all. Our anniversary celebration was her idea. "It's been 12 years, Jason," she'd said with that soft smile of hers, one that made me feel like the luckiest man alive. "Let's do something big this year. Invite family, friends, everyone we love." I had no idea that she was planning something entirely different. The night began perfectly. I'd rented out a beautiful, intimate event space in downtown Austin, the kind Emily had always admired. It was tastefully decorated, the tables set with white roses, her favorite, and dim candlelight that cast a warm, inviting glow over the room. As our guests arrived, the energy was lively, filled with laughter and old memories. My parents arrived early, and I could tell by the looks on their faces that they were impressed. My mom clutched my arm, whispering, "You've done well, son. Emily must be thrilled." And she was, or so it seemed. Emily floated around the room, greeting everyone, laughing at the jokes, and occasionally squeezing my hand in gratitude. I was proud to be her husband that night, standing by her side, basking in the warmth of our family and friends. Then, at some point, I noticed something that caught me off guard. Emily's laughter seemed a bit different. Her attention seemed directed towards someone else, a man who looked vaguely familiar. He was handsome, that was clear, but I couldn't place him. Maybe he was a colleague? I tried to brush off the creeping sense of unease, but as the evening wore on, I noticed them together more and more. She'd lean in close, her hand on his arm, eyes alight with a kind of thrill I hadn't seen in years. The alarm bells in my head started ringing louder. My father noticed me watching her and raised an eyebrow. I could see the question in his eyes, but I quickly forced a smile and nodded, pretending nothing was wrong. But things were far from right. By dessert, I was watching her every move. Each time Emily drifted toward him, I felt a tightening in my chest, like a noose was being slowly drawn around my heart. This wasn't just casual conversation. There was an undeniable, raw intensity in her gaze that I could not ignore. She looked at him the way she used to look at me, and every lingering touch between them made my stomach churn. I excused myself, pretending I needed some air. Once outside, I dialed my best friend, Kyle. He'd known Emily and me since college, and if anyone could make sense of this, it was him. "Kyle," I began, trying to keep my voice steady, I think something's going on with Emily. At our anniversary party, she's acting weird with this guy." "What do you mean, weird?" he asked, immediately alert. "I don't know, man. She's just too close to him. I can't shake this feeling. I don't even know who he is." "Listen, Jason, you know how she is." Kyle tried to reassure me. "Emily is friendly. She's always been warm. Don't jump to conclusions." But this was different, and I knew it. When I returned to the party, I noticed my mother watching me, concern etched on her face. Before I could assure her I was fine, the lights dimmed, and Emily called for everyone's attention. "Everyone." She beamed, holding her glass high, her voice clear and steady. "Thank you all for being here tonight. It's been 12 amazing years with this incredible man." The room erupted into applause, and my heart lifted, just for a moment. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was letting old insecurities get to me. But as the applause died down, Emily continued. "I have a confession to make," she said, her voice dropping into a tone that silenced the entire room. My heart raced as her eyes met mine. There was a flicker of something there. Hesitation, maybe regret. I couldn't place it. She opened her mouth to speak again, and I braced myself, expecting something lighthearted, a cute anecdote about our early years together. "I've found someone." Someone who makes me feel alive in a way I haven't felt in a long time, she said softly, her gaze shifting away from me to the man standing beside her. Time stopped. The blood drained from my face as the realization hit me like a freight train. She wasn't joking. This wasn't a clever ploy to keep everyone entertained. I felt my mother's hand clamp down on my arm, her grip tight, as though she, too, needed the support. Around us, I could feel the awkward shifting of guests, their glances flickering from Emily to me, as if waiting for one of us to break the unbearable tension. This man, she continued, voice trembling, has shown me a different side of myself. I know tonight was meant to be a celebration of my marriage to Jason, but I can't keep pretending. Emily, stop, I managed to choke out, my voice raw and barely audible. But she didn't stop. She kept talking, kept ripping the seams of our life apart in front of everyone we knew and loved. I don't remember much about what happened next. I know that my father finally broke the silence, his voice hoarse with disbelief as he pulled me aside, murmuring, "We need to leave, now." My mother was openly crying, my friends and family were horrified, and Emily's new man just stood there, smug, indifferent to the wreckage they'd just caused. Kyle found me outside, his face pale with shock. "Jason, man, I can't believe she did that, in front of everyone." Neither could I. My entire marriage had just crumbled, and the world was still spinning around me. I could barely breathe, and my heart was shattering with each passing second. Emily followed me out, her heels clicking against the pavement. "Jason, please," she began, her voice soft, almost remorseful. "I didn't want you to find out this way." "Then why do it?" I snapped, turning to face her. "Why humiliate me like that? Why drag our friends, our family, into this? I thought it would be better for you to know. I didn't want to keep living a lie." "A lie?" The word felt bitter in my mouth. "So our life, our family, our son, that was all a lie to you?" She didn't respond, her gaze drifting away. That single gesture, that refusal to meet my eyes, shattered any illusions I had left about her loyalty. For years, I had believed in us. I'd given everything to her, to our family, and now she was standing there, unwilling to face what she'd done. I turned and walked away, leaving her alone under the streetlights. I needed to get out, to find somewhere that didn't remind me of her, somewhere I could think. I didn't want to look back. The next few days were a blur. I stayed at a hotel, avoiding my family's concerned phone calls, avoiding everyone. I couldn't bear to face anyone, especially not my son, Liam. How would I tell him that his mother had torn our family apart? How would I explain that the life he'd known was built on lies? It wasn't until the third night, alone in that dim hotel room, that the rage began to take hold. The hurt was still there, a raw, gaping wound, but the anger was stronger. I couldn't let her get away with this, not after what she'd done. She'd shattered my trust, torn apart my family, and destroyed my dignity in front of everyone I loved. If she thought I was just going to walk away quietly, she was wrong. In the quiet of that hotel room, the first flicker of a plan began to form. I wasn't just going to move on and let her rewrite our story. She'd chosen to do this publicly, in front of everyone we knew. That's the part that kept eating at me, twisting the knife deeper. She wanted everyone to see it. The following day, I called my lawyer, Tom. We'd gone to law school together, though I'd left for a more business-focused career. If anyone would know how to make Emily pay legally and financially, it was Tom. He picked up on the first ring. "Jason," he greeted me cautiously, "I heard about what happened. I'm sorry, man." "Thanks, Tom," I said, my voice thick with anger that surprised even me. "I need your help. I'm not going to let her walk away from this like it was nothing. She took everything from me. Tom, my family, my reputation. She did it in front of everyone we know. So, what are my options?" Tom was quiet for a moment before he spoke. "Jason, I know this is hard, and I know you want to get back at her. But listen, divorce cases like this can get ugly fast. And if you want to keep custody of Liam, we have to be smart." His words were like a punch to the gut. The thought of Emily getting custody of Liam, of her continuing to play the loving mother while living a double life, was unthinkable. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to listen to Tom's advice. "First," he continued, "you'll want to start gathering evidence of her infidelity. You need concrete proof, not just rumors or her own admission at the party. The courts need evidence that will show not only infidelity but also the kind of instability that makes her unfit to have custody of your son. If you can prove a pattern of behavior, it'll help us." I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. "What kind of evidence?" "Messages, photos, receipts, anything that can verify that she's been with this guy for a while. And it would help if you could find out more about him. His background might show us if there's any risk in having him around Liam. It was exactly the kind of challenge I needed to keep my mind busy. Alright, Tom. I'll get you everything I can find. But I also want her to lose her claim on the house, our assets, everything. I don't want her to come out of this with anything. Tom paused, then replied, "We can aim for that, Jason. But just keep in mind that courts often favor a fair split. But if you're willing to play it smart, I'll do everything I can." Over the next few days, I slipped into a mode I never thought I'd see in myself, relentless and calculating. I had copies of every financial record, all our shared bank accounts, her phone records, and any shared computer data. It didn't take long before I found her secret, a whole folder on her laptop, hidden under a mundane name, filled with messages, photos, and dates spanning nearly 6 months. The other man's name was Daniel Kavanaugh, and from what I could gather, he was no stranger to broken relationships. With a quick background check, I learned that he'd been divorced twice, each time leaving behind a trail of angry exes who described him as manipulative, self-centered, and reckless. He had no children of his own, and it seemed that stability wasn't exactly a word in his vocabulary. The more I read, the more disgusted I felt. This was the man Emily had chosen over our family, over me. But the photos, that was what shattered me the most. There she was, with him, in places we'd visited together. The same smile, the same glow, the same passion she used to have for me, now redirected at him. They were at our favorite restaurant, the beach where we took Liam every summer, even at our anniversary party venue on the night she'd told me she was staying late at work. I printed everything, every photo, every message, every sickening memory. As I flipped through the evidence, I could feel the anger inside me crystallizing. This wasn't just betrayal, it was a calculated abandonment of everything we'd built together. The next step was simple. I took the evidence to Tom and filed for divorce. But that wasn't the only thing I had planned. The day I served Emily the divorce papers was a cold one. I hadn't spoken to her since the party, and she hadn't reached out either. Maybe she thought I'd just disappear, like some discarded memory. But when I knocked on the door of our house, the look on her face when she saw me told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't expecting this. "Jason," she said, her voice laced with an odd mixture of guilt and defensiveness, "we need to talk." I held up the envelope containing the papers. "We'll talk in court. I'll be seeking full custody of Liam." Her eyes widened in shock, her expression one of pure disbelief. "Full custody? You can't be serious. Liam needs his mother." "A mother who's been sneaking around for half a year with a man who can't hold down a single stable relationship?" I replied coldly. "I have evidence, Emily. Evidence that shows exactly what kind of environment you're choosing for him. If you think I'm going to let you drag Liam through that, you're more delusional than I thought." Her face paled, and for a moment, she seemed to falter. "You don't understand, Jason," she whispered. "I wasn't happy. I haven't been for a long time." "Then you should have left," I shot back, my voice low and seething. "You didn't have to destroy everything in the process." She reached out to touch my arm, but I stepped back, unwilling to let her get any closer. "Please, Jason," she said, her voice soft, almost pleading, "can we at least try to handle this civilly? For Liam?" "Civilly?" I laughed, a bitter sound that echoed in the empty entryway of our once shared home. "You think civilly is humiliating me in front of everyone we know, tearing apart our family like it's some kind of entertainment? You don't deserve civil, Emily." I handed her the envelope and left, leaving her standing in the doorway, her face a mask of regret and anger. With the divorce in motion, I knew the next steps wouldn't be easy. Emily would fight for Liam, but I was prepared for that. Every conversation, every piece of evidence, every bit of anger I'd held back would now be my fuel. But then came the twist I hadn't expected. Daniel Kavanaugh. One morning, about 2 weeks after filing the divorce, I received an email from an unfamiliar address. At first, I thought it was some spam, but when I opened it, a simple subject line made my heart race. Subject: "You're not the only one she hurt." I clicked on the message, and the words hit me like a sledgehammer. "Jason. My name is Grace Andrews. I was married to Daniel Kavanaugh 2 years ago. I found your contact through some research after I learned he's involved with your soon-to-be ex-wife, Emily. I'm reaching out because I think you need to know the kind of man Daniel really is. He's not just a cheater, he's a manipulator, and he left me in pieces. If you want more information, please contact me. I think it's time someone finally took him down. Grace Andrews." Reading her message, I felt a surge of hope. Grace had been in my position, on the receiving end of Daniel's deception. If she was willing to help, it meant I had an ally, someone who knew how to expose him in ways I hadn't thought of yet. I replied immediately, setting up a call with her for later that day. When we finally spoke, her voice was steady but tinged with bitterness. Daniel is good at playing people, Jason, she told me. When I met him, he seemed perfect, charming, considerate, everything you'd want in a partner. But once he got what he wanted, he started changing, slowly, then all at once. He became controlling, manipulative, and he'd lie about everything. I didn't even realize how deep his lies went until it was too late. I listened, hanging on to every word as she described how Daniel had broken her trust, drained her bank accounts, and left her on the edge of bankruptcy. He'd made her believe she was losing her mind, that every suspicion was just her own insecurity. I could hear the pain in her voice, the same kind of pain I'd felt when Emily had torn our life apart. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked finally. "Because he doesn't deserve to get away with it," she replied, "and neither does your wife." We spent hours strategizing, piecing together every scrap of information she had about Daniel's shady dealings. Grace had kept records of everything, a trail of bank transactions, falsified statements, even emails that showed his infidelity and deceit. If we could tie Daniel to Emily's life, show that he was a destructive influence, I might have the ammunition I needed for court. When we ended the call, I felt a strange sense of relief. I wasn't alone in this. And now, I had more than just my anger. I had a plan. In the days that followed, I gathered every bit of information Grace had sent me and compiled it alongside my evidence of Emily's affair. The court date was looming, and I knew this information would be vital in showing the judge what was truly at stake if Liam stayed with his mother. But I didn't stop there. I started reaching out to my mutual friends with Emily, planting seeds, revealing small pieces of the truth. It wasn't enough to destroy her reputation, but enough to shift the narrative. I wanted people to start questioning her actions, to wonder if they'd ever truly known her. When the court date finally arrived, I walked in with a quiet sense of determination. Emily was already there, seated beside her lawyer, her face a mask of confidence. But I knew, deep down, that confidence was a front. She had no idea what was coming. The hearing was brutal. Emily's lawyer tried to paint her as the devoted mother, someone who'd simply fallen out of love. But when Tom introduced the evidence, detailing her long-term affair and Daniel's shady past, I saw her confidence falter. Grace's documentation had been enough to force Daniel to testify. When he was called to the stand, his attempts to charm the court fell flat. Under questioning, he was forced to admit his history of financial misconduct, manipulation, and deception. The judge listened, his expression growing colder with each new revelation. By the end of the day, I knew I'd made my case. As the court proceedings drew to a close, I waited, holding my breath as the judge reviewed the final statements. My heart pounded, echoing in my chest like a drum, drowning out everything around me. It all came down to this. I glanced over at Emily, who sat silently with her lawyer, looking drained, a shell of the person she used to be. Daniel was nowhere in sight. After his disastrous testimony, he'd slipped out of the courtroom, leaving her to face the consequences alone. Finally, the judge spoke. "Given the evidence presented, it is clear that Mrs. Williams has not maintained an environment conducive to the welfare of her child. Custody will therefore be awarded to Mr. Williams, with limited visitation rights granted to Mrs. Williams, subject to review." My heart sank with relief and triumph. I had won custody of Liam. He would not have to grow up in the shadow of Emily's betrayal or be influenced by a man as destructive as Daniel. It wasn't just a victory, it was the redemption I needed to move forward. After the ruling, Emily looked over at me, her expression unreadable. For a moment, I thought she might say something, try to apologize or explain herself, but she only gave a small nod before leaving the courtroom with her head down. I stayed behind, watching the last of the spectators file out, my hands gripping the edge of the bench. When Tom clapped a hand on my shoulder, I realized I'd been holding my breath. "You did it, Jason," he said quietly. "Liam's going to be okay. You both are." After the ruling, I took a month off work to spend time with Liam, to rebuild the life that Emily had so carelessly shattered. Liam was only 8, but he had sensed the tension, the whispers, the empty spaces where his mother's laughter used to be. I kept things simple for him, explaining only that he'd be spending more time with me, that we'd get through this together. He was a resilient kid, and with every passing day, he seemed to grow a little stronger, a little more secure. One evening, as I was tucking him into bed, he looked up at me, his eyes filled with a worry that no child should have to bear. "Dad, do you think Mom will be okay?" His question hit me harder than any of the accusations, the anger, or even the pain of betrayal. Because Liam still loved her, in the way only a child could. Despite everything, he still wanted to believe in his mother. I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "Yes, buddy, your mom is going to be okay. She just needs some time to figure things out." He nodded, accepting my answer, but I could see he was still struggling to understand. I kissed him on the forehead, lingering a moment longer than usual, silently promising that I'd shield him from as much of this as I could. Months passed, and slowly, I began to put the pieces of my life back together. I returned to work, focused on raising Liam, and cut all ties with people who reminded me of the past. But the wounds Emily had left behind were still there, raw and painful, a constant reminder of what she'd done. Just when I thought things had finally quieted down, an unexpected call stirred up old memories. It was from Grace Andrews, Daniel's ex-wife. Since our court strategy had worked, I hadn't heard from her. I assumed she'd moved on, just as I had tried to. But her voice sounded urgent, and the moment I answered, I could tell she had something important to say. "Jason, I don't know if you want to hear this," she began, her tone cautious, "but Daniel's back. He's been asking around about you." "What do you mean, asking around?" I felt a familiar anger flare up, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Apparently, he didn't take the court defeat well. He's been telling people you were the reason he lost, that you somehow ruined his reputation. He's convinced you orchestrated everything just to destroy him." It was absurd, considering Daniel had done that to himself, but knowing his type, it didn't surprise me. People like Daniel never took responsibility, they always needed someone else to blame. I clenched the phone tighter, a new sense of foreboding washing over me. "What do you think he's planning?" I asked. "I don't know," she admitted, sounding frustrated, "but be careful, he's not the type to just let things go. And he's got connections. He'll want some kind of revenge." The threat of Daniel hung over me like a storm cloud, but as weeks went by with no sign of him, I began to relax, convincing myself he'd moved on to some other target. My life was slowly finding a new rhythm. Liam was adjusting, I'd reconnected with old friends, and even the house, once filled with memories of Emily, started to feel like my own again. But one afternoon, I came home to find a single envelope slipped under my door. My name was scrawled on the front in messy handwriting that I didn't recognize. Inside was a photograph of Emily and Liam at a local park, an outing I hadn't known about. The message was clear: someone was watching us. I called Tom, detailing the situation, and he immediately suggested filing for a restraining order. He warned that while the photo didn't show Daniel directly, it implied a threat. But when I brought it up in court, Daniel's lawyer dismissed it, claiming Daniel had no intention of causing harm, that I was seeing threats where there were none. The judge didn't grant the order, leaving me feeling helpless. That evening, as I sat alone, replaying the day's events in my mind, I made a decision. If the law couldn't protect me, I'd take matters into my own hands. I started by changing my daily routine. I varied my commute, took different routes to school with Liam, and avoided predictable patterns. I even set up security cameras around the house, an extra layer of vigilance for both our sakes. But the looming fear of Daniel's unpredictable moves never fully left me. Then, one evening, I received a call from an old friend who worked as a private investigator. I'd reached out to him weeks earlier, hoping he might have some advice on dealing with Daniel. Now, it seemed he had news. "Jason," he said, his voice serious, "I found out something about Daniel. He's been under investigation for fraud. Turns out, he's been embezzling from his own company for years. They're planning to press charges, but they don't have enough to make it stick yet. I thought you'd want to know." I felt a grim satisfaction at the news. Daniel's fall was inevitable, and now, it was closer than ever. If I played this right, I might even be able to speed up the process. With the information my friend provided, I called Grace again, sharing what I'd learned. She was relieved to hear it, and together, we compiled the rest of the evidence she'd saved over the years. The goal was clear: we'd hand it all over to the authorities, letting them see just how deep Daniel's lies went. The final blow came a few weeks later. Grace and I received a joint message from the police department, informing us that Daniel had been formally charged with embezzlement, fraud, and multiple counts of financial misconduct. His career, his reputation, everything he valued, was crumbling around him. And with Daniel facing a future behind bars, I could finally breathe again. It wasn't until the following year, when the divorce was finalized, that I truly felt free. Emily had lost custody, keeping only supervised visitation rights, and Daniel's presence had faded, leaving only faint shadows of old fears. My life with Liam settled into a peaceful routine, and we began to rebuild our little family, one day at a time. On the first anniversary of the divorce, I took Liam to the same park where Emily had once taken him without my knowledge. It was our place now, a symbol of the future I was building for him, a future free from lies and betrayal. As we sat by the lake, watching the ducks glide across the water, Liam leaned against my shoulder. "Dad, are we going to be okay?" I put an arm around him, holding him close. "Yeah, buddy," I replied, feeling the weight of truth in my words. We're going to be more than okay. And in that moment, I knew that everything I'd fought for, every sleepless night, every courtroom battle, every confrontation with the past, had been worth it. We were free, and I had a new life ahead of me, a life that was finally my own.